Good morning, or whatever time it is where each of you are today. I'm really happy to be here again. Um, so, what I thought I would do before we dive into meditation instruction is I'd like to provide a little context. So, the word meditation that we use in English stems from the Latin meditatum, which is to ponder. So, I've assembled a little historical background for you to ponder or contemplate, um, just to give you an idea of the lineage and the span of time, humanity's time with contemplative practices. There's researchers that believe that meditation in some form may likely be as old as humanity itself. There's artifacts and records referring to meditation that can be found across multiple cultures and around the globe. The oldest documented images of people meditating, people seated in meditative postures with their eyes half closed, can be found in wall art and paintings from India that date back from 5,000 to 3,500 before Common Era. There's texts describing meditation practices in the Hindu Veda, which date back to 1500 BCE. But before that, stories had been already passed down orally for centuries. Buddhist practice came into the picture around 600 years before the Common Era, and then made their way to China and Japan in the next 200 years. There's references in the book of Genesis where Isaac goes out into a field to contemplate. Eastern Orthodox Christian use of meditation practices are documented in the 10th to 14th centuries. And in Islam, meditative techniques that became essential elements of Sufism are noted in the 11th and 12th centuries. Jumping pretty close to our time, in Burma, the Vipassana movement began in the 50s, around the same time that Maharishi Mahesh Yogi started promoting transcendental meditation in the US and abroad. And in the 70s, John Kabat-Zinn at the University of Massachusetts began developing mindfulness training programs that include meditation practice for use in technical settings. So that's my little history lesson. There's countless forms of meditation. Some of them include movement, visualizations, focusing on sounds, and there's many seated forms that are grounded in stillness and silence. And each of these types of meditation has a slightly different purpose, spanning from reaching states of pure consciousness or transcendence and liberation from earthly constraints, uses tools for spiritual development as ways to connect intimately with the divine, to deepen self-awareness, to create a sense of tranquility, to increase levels of insight, and to establish mental balance and stability. So the word meditation can really mean a lot of different things. What I would like to share today will be meditation instruction in which we are simply continuously redirecting our attention to the present moment experience of being. There's kind of three levels or interrelated perspectives that I like to keep in mind when doing this, and they are body, breath, and mind. So I'm going to speak a little bit about each of those as our actual instruction. We'll have a little period of meditation that I will time for you, and then we'll have plenty of time after that for questions and answers and discussion that I hope will be interactive between all of us and not just people asking me questions. So body, breath, and mind, I think of working as outer to inner. And with body, we begin by choosing the position that we're sitting in and or laying in. But usually finding a position that is wakeful yet comfortable and has a balance of being dignified and upright and alert without being strained. So there's a few ways we could do this. And whether you're sitting in a chair, which most people sitting at a computer would be, or if you're on a meditation cushion or kneeling on a seiza bench, in any case, we still need to create a solid, firm foundation where it will allow us to be comfortable and wakeful and set us up in a position, literally in a position to work with our breath and mind. So whether you're in a chair, a bench, or a cushion, make sure it's not overly soft and not something you're going to sink into, but that you can actually feel your sits bones and have a good posture. So if you're in a chair, maybe a kitchen chair, a folding chair, or a desk chair, rather than a plush living room kind of chair. If you're sitting on the floor on a zafu or gandam, that's great. But a stack of folded clothes works as well, and you don't need to have a dedicated special cushion for this unless it's something you'd like to have. But wherever you're sitting, you want to have your hips to be elevated higher than your knees are. And in a chair, that might mean scooting a little forwards in the chair or putting a riser under your seat so your hips are higher than your knees. And the reason for this is by having our hips higher than our knees, it allows our pelvis to tilt slightly forwards. And when we do that, we're sitting forward on our sits bones rather than leaning back on our tailbone. And by sitting forwards on your sits bones and having your pelvis tilted a little bit forward, that's going to allow the natural curve of your spine to occur. People think of sitting up straight, but we really don't want a straight spine. We want our curve so it tilts out toward your rear end a little bit, forward toward your belly, and then tilts back a little bit toward your shoulders. And the natural shape of the spine is actually more of an S than a straight line. So let's see. Finding that position with your hips and your knees. If you're in a chair, you'll want your feet flat on the ground in front of you. And if you're not tall enough for that, you might slide a couple of books or something under your feet so you have a place to hold the weight of your body and balance it between the base of your spine and your feet. And if you are sitting on the floor, balancing your weight equally between your seat and your knees. And all of this helps the spine create that position. Each of us has a slightly different center of gravity, and our positioning is going to look a little different from each other. And we'll get into that once we get to the end of the body part. So our legs, if you're on the floor, would be crossed without crossing your ankles, but crossing at the knees. There's the Burmese position where your legs are in front of each other this way. There's half lotus where one foot would be on top, and full lotus where both feet would be on top. And any of those are good positions to be in and tend to not be too difficult on your circulation, the way crossing your ankles could be. So sitting up, allowing your natural curve in your spine to express itself. This also lifts your ribs off your lungs. If you're hunched forwards, you're pressing against your lungs and you're impacting your ability to breathe fully. And by sitting up a little taller with that full curve, S curve of your spine, you're pulling your ribs off your lungs, and you can take much deeper breaths. For our shoulders, it's nice to kind of just do a couple of shoulder rolls before beginning and pulling your ears toward your shoulders. And then rather than thinking of dropping straight down, imagine you can push your shoulders out across the room and expand and open. And that's going to create a little more breathing space in the upper chest cavity. And again, allow our lungs to work at their full capacity. For your arms, you can let them just drop at your sides, leave your elbows wherever they landed, and then just bending at your elbows, bringing your palms to the front of either to rest on your knees, or your palms can rest in what's called the cosmic mudra, which is your dominant hand on the bottom supporting your other hand, and your thumbs just lightly touching. Not pushing against each other. The image I like is if you were holding a piece of paper between your thumbs, somebody could walk up and grab the paper without having to tug. So just very gently making contact. This cosmic mudra, there's a lot of different hand positions and yogic traditions that were inherited by different meditation practices. And this one, the cosmic mudra, is the one that is supposed to help develop a mindset of clarity and openness. But if it's more comfortable, some people like their hands on their knees as well. If you are doing that, just making sure you're not pulling yourself forward or pushing your back by the placement of your hands. And it gets a little bit more internal. We're going to take our head and just try to be tall. And the way we do that is by slightly tucking in the chin. And by tucking in your chin, you're allowing the upper vertebrae of your spine to expand a little bit. And if you just play with it a little bit, you could feel your spine getting a little bit taller when your chin is tucked in. We place our tongue, this gets very specific. We place your tongue on the upper palate right where it meets your front teeth. And this it completes an energetic circuit in the body, and it also helps manage saliva a little bit. And it gives you a place to put your tongue so you're not trying to figure it out. So we have our shoulders, our hips higher than our knees, our shoulders over our hips, our ears over our shoulders. And now just to find your own center of balance, there's two ways that work nicely for this. And one is just almost like a pendulum, letting your body make a few big circles and then smaller ones and smaller ones and smaller ones until your body finds its center. And there's a moment where the circles become invisible from the outside, but you can still feel that you're making them. And once the circles get so small that it feels like you've stopped moving, that's your body's center of gravity. And the other one is just rocking side to side, making little arcs until they're smaller and smaller and smaller, and the movement's no longer visible. And when you can no longer feel that you're moving, that could be your center. And the same works from rocking front to back. But once you've found your position, which is going to always look a little bit different than anyone else because your anatomy is different than anyone else's, and we have everything in place, the last detail of the body is what we do with our eyes. And in shamatha and in zazen meditation, our eyes are half open. You have a soft, unfocused gaze. You can blink whenever needed, but rather than closing your eyes, this is going to help you stay awake, and it's also going to help you not slip into too internal a world. And this practice is about the present moment, and our present moment involves what's going inside us and also around us. So we want some visual contact with the environment, just as a way to keep ourselves present in all ways. So you're not looking at things, you have a soft, unfocused gaze, but you are receiving a little bit of visual information. But you're not staring and studying and sinking into what you're seeing. It's not an important part of the practice. um, so the next thing after body is actually, are there any questions about body before we move on? And you could just raise your physical hand or the Zoom virtual hand in the reaction section. Okay, so let's just enjoy our upright, wakeful position. And we're going to move from body toward breath. And what we're going to be doing with our breath is called diaphragmatic breathing. And this is actually how our breathing begins as soon as we leave the womb. And someplace around in the end of our first year of time on Earth, we start breathing a little differently and we breathe into our chest. But what we're going to do is begin by breathing diaphragmatically into our belly, like we do as babies, filling the belly first with an inhale, and then the next part of the inhale will fill the center cavity of your body. And then the final part of the inhale would eventually fill the upper part of your lungs that are close to your collarbones. And it feels a little bit backwards if you're not familiar with it. And sometimes there's even a moment of panicky feeling of I'm not breathing the way I'm used to. I don't know this. Am I going to be all right? And nobody's ever suffocated trying to do this that I've heard. But filling your belly with the breath, then the middle of your lungs, then the top. And as you exhale, you're going to have the air leave the top of your lungs, and then the center, and then your belly. Let's just take a couple of breaths and see if we can get the hang of that if we're not familiar with it. And this is interesting because we breathe all the time without much effort or thought or consciousness. And by placing your attention on something that's very familiar, it almost becomes unfamiliar and interesting and something you can get curious about. So begin by bringing your attention, meticulous kind of attention, to all the subtle details of each breath. The cool air coming in your nose, the sensation of it going down your throat, your belly filling, your ribs expanding to the back and sides, your sternum lifting at the end of the inhale, your shoulders might rise. Soft, fluid breath at your own pace, but beginning with filling the belly. And if you're leaning against the back of a chair, you might be feeling your ribs pushing against the back of the chair with each inhale. And looking at your breath almost like you're an explorer that landed in a new land that you don't have any preconceived notions about. And you're experiencing it freshly with an open mind and curiosity, and just seeing what each breath is like, and noticing how one breath might be different from the next without getting too caught up in labeling it or defining it. You're just noticing. Each breath is a little different, almost like snowflakes if you live in a place with snowflakes. So moving a little further inward from body and breath is mind. And as we breathe, our intention is to place our attention on the breath, each breath, noticing how each breath, as I said, is a little bit different from others. And allowing yourself to just dwell with that. While we're doing this, we don't need to be doing anything else. We don't need to be tracking anything. We don't need to be projecting. We don't need to be remembering, but just paying attention to the breath with meticulous detail. But what tends to happen is as soon as we start doing this and paying attention to our breath, our minds are guaranteed to start wandering. They're going to remember something. They're going to notice we forgot something. A sound is going to grab our attention and we're going to start wondering what the sound was, where it came from. You're going to wonder if you've turned off your coffee pot. Wonder if somebody needs your help or attention. You're going to look at things that you've done recently and think you should have done them differently. And all of this mental activity is completely normal activity of human consciousness. Whether we're normally very focused people or if we're have highly distractible minds, we're all prone to this, and it's okay. This is our normal mind. We're not trying to fix it. We're just trying to be with whoever and however we naturally are. And this is just how our brain works, and it's something to accept. So while in meditation, what we're going to do is we're going to gently grab the steering wheel away from that part of our mind and redirect our attention from wherever we've wandered off back to the physical sensation of breathing. So each time we begin noticing our breath, something else catches our attention, we just bring ourselves back to the breath. And we do this without judgment, without criticism, without defensiveness, without making excuses or creating stories or rationalizing anyway. We simply just go back to the breath. We breathe. And as thoughts arise, we notice them, let them be. We might hear a sound, we notice it, we let it be. We don't need to name it, understand it, study it. You can always come back to the thoughts at another time when you're not meditating. They'll be there for you again. So it's just a matter of bringing your attention, getting into position, finding your breath, and then bringing your attention back to the breath over and over again. There's a helpful method for some people that would like a little extra support system working with their breath, especially if you find yourself highly distractible, and that is to count the breaths. And we count the breaths in cycles of 10. There's nothing very special about 10. It's just a way of knowing when to begin again, so we know we're keeping track of what we're doing and we haven't drifted off. So the way to work with breath, if you choose to, is take your full inhale. And then for the full length of the exhale, silently say the number 1 to yourself, dragging it out as long as it takes to exhale. And at the end of that breath, inhaling again. And for the full time that you're exhaling, you would silently count the number 2 to yourself and go on until 10, and then begin again at 1. And if you find that you're still having a lot of thoughts interrupting your ability to pay attention to your breath, you would begin counting and say you counted to 3, fully attending to your breath, and then you started thinking about something you're going to do later today. You would simply bring yourself back to the breath, give yourself a fresh start again at number 1, and begin counting at 1 until you get to 10. And the reality is, for a lot of people just starting out, we might sit for 15 minutes and you would not get to past number 3 or 4 once. My reality when I started was I could sit for a half hour and never get past 6 for months of practice. And the important thing is that you're just bringing yourself back to 1, giving yourself a fresh start, that you are paying enough attention to become aware of when your attention has drifted off. And that's really what we're doing here, is we're learning to take a little control of our mind and deciding where we would like to place our attention for the time that we're sitting in meditation. So does anyone have any questions before we go into a short period of meditation? Or anything, a comment you'd like to make? Okay, so I'm going to begin a meditation period, and I think we'll sit for 15 minutes. Does that sound okay for you, Jeff? Um, I will ring a bell 3 times to begin our sitting meditation, and I'll ring twice at the end. So begin by reestablishing your posture.
You'll want to make sure your original sound is on too, Gakyo.
Okay, thank you. Find your posture again. Hips higher than knees, shoulders above hips, ears above shoulders, centered. Take a few breaths. Begin bringing your attention to the breath. And either working with just bringing your attention back to the breath over and over, or working with counting your breaths and returning to number 1 each time you get distracted, and returning to 1 each time you reach number 10. Thank you for your practice. So I'm curious what you were noticing, what your observations are. If you have questions or comments, feel free to unmute and just speak up. It's a small enough group for that to work. I'm gonna grab a drink too. Do you have meditation experience, and was this different in any way or similar to what you're accustomed to?
So thanks for the session, and it's really helpful. So the first thing here is I'm pretty new to meditation, and honestly, I was completely distracted. I was thinking so many things, and like the time itself was like I felt like it was almost an hour. I'm just sitting idle. So so
That's
it's
why we
pretty
didn't go
tough.
too long.
Yeah, I think I need a lot of more practice. So
Yeah, it's really normal. The first thing most people say is they had no idea how active their minds normally are all
mm,
day. And this is a way to kind of get a glimpse and become more familiar with yourself. But
yes.
it's something that does shift in time. And the more your body learns how to relax into stillness, the more your mind
Mhm.
can find its way to stillness, and vice versa. The stiller your mind becomes, as it quiets down in time, your body starts relaxing into that space also. Because we also find that our bodies are used to much more activity the same way our minds are. And it's a little foreign and unfamiliar feeling. And it takes a little getting used to it to trust that it's okay.
Yeah. So crazy.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank
And it
you.
does get easier. And eventually, what you had said about time becomes the opposite, and a bell rings at the end of a period, and you have a, I can't believe that's over already.
Yeah. Waiting for that to happen.
It does, as you said, it does take practice. And they
True.
refer to this as a practice, and not necessarily one that you do to accomplish a feat and perfect
Hmm.
something, but something that you just keep practicing and keep working with as you grow.
True. And I did like the technique of counting 3 till 10.
Mm-hmm.
So I could not go past 3 right now. So looking forward to reach the 10 mark.
It can really be amazing how much thinking we do when we don't
Hmm.
need to. I mean, there's times you're on a task and you want to be focused on that and attending to it, but there's always so much chatter going on in our minds until we start training it otherwise. And when we do, and we learn to kind of have more focus, everything
Hmm.
we're doing with a higher quality of attention. Whether it's preparing a meal or planning what you're going to do for a day or taking a hike. You're noticing when you're just noticing the things that you're doing and not allowing the superfluous things to interrupt. It's amazing what our harnessed mind can do for us.
True. That's actually very true. Need to be more mindful of what's happening nearby rather than the
And
chatters in my
attend to
mind.
that. Yeah.
Yes.
And attend to what is happening and what you are doing rather than the 70 other things that are right in the periphery. Thank you. Anyone else have an observation or a comment or question? We still have some time.
Uh, just a quick thought about this, Gakyo. I've never thought this before, but it occurs to me that that the times where, I'll speak for myself, the times where I sort of lose track of what I'm doing, and rather than being present in my body here in front of my computer in my office, I'm thinking about unloading the dishwasher when we get down here this morning, or taking the trash out, or whatever else I have to do today. Those instances of getting distracted, see, it occurs to me, they're actually very useful and very helpful, because they give me an opportunity to be kind and gentle and kind of forgiving of myself, which I can use that because I'm very self-critical. And if in the course of, Nilav was talking about, that seemed like an hour, in the course of 15 minutes to lose track of doing something so simple as just being here 20 times takes a lot of forgiving yourself.
Yeah,
And
and acceptance.
I think that's really useful. I think it's good training for getting up and walking around in the world and making all kinds of mistakes like I do all day long.
And interacting with others and their mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a thought or observation? I'm curious what this was like for you.
This is Carla. Thank you very much for offering this. My background is in engaged Buddhism with Thich Nhat Hanh, Plum Village tradition, and we typically keep our eyes closed. And the open eyes were helpful to me today because I'm I've been at the computer since early this morning, and I'm tired. I'm already tired, and so when I was closing my eyes like I'm used to, just kind of out of habit, I was really sleepy and that's why I turned my camera off. I think I'm kind of weaving around a little bit. And when I kept my eyes more open, I was able to be more alert and more awake to what was going on. So that was helpful today. Yeah.
There's a few, and sometimes it can be a really difficult thing if you're not accustomed to having your eyes open. But as you mentioned, we're much more likely to doze off if our eyes are asleep. But the other thing is we also just almost use the back of our eyelids like a movie screen and project movies of our dreams and our thoughts and visualizations onto them. And you can't do that when they're open and there's some visual stimuli coming in. So it helps keep you in touch with the rest of what you're doing. And the other thing is, for a lot of practices that have eyes closed, and I talked earlier about all these different kinds of meditation and the intentions behind all kinds of practice. So some of them are very, very internal, and this one is more about being in contact with the world. And I'll often close my eyes for a few of the first few breaths just to help me find that inner awareness, and it makes it a little bit easier for me to find my breath in the beginning if I'm not seeing at the same time. But it really does shift your the size of your circle of attention, and it can keep you a little less cut off from the rest of the world when your eyes are open. And the people we haven't heard from yet, is there anything that you would like to share or add? Dariana, I'm not sure how to pronounce the other person, if you're a Jan or a Jane or a Janie. Just give that a moment. Jeff, I don't know if you had any announcements or anything that you would like to end with. We have a couple of minutes before the hour. Um, If not, I can just say a little bit about this practice. And if you would like to begin establishing a practice, um, consistency is very valuable. So rather than an occasional, maybe weekly, longer sitting, beginning with shorter sitting periods daily, 5 or 10 minutes, can make a big difference in establishing your familiarity from the inside out with the practice. And it also has been proven to have some health benefits. A short daily practice of as little as 10 minutes a day can have an impact on your digestive system, on your neurological system, on your ability to pay attention to things, and a sense of groundedness, um, an ability to become more present throughout the day. Blood pressure can decrease. There's a whole list of biological indicators that even 5 minutes a day of meditation can do. So, finding a way to bring it consistently into your day. And it's also something where even if you have just 1 or 2 minutes between meetings or appointments, to just take a moment and connect with your breath and kind of situate yourself in the present moment. Notice where you are, who you are, what you're doing, who you're with. And it could be done silently, it could be done face to face with somebody and they don't even recognize that you're using a presencing mindfulness practice in the moment. But starting slowly and then adding to longer periods of time is a great way to go rather than setting yourself up to for a big challenge that's very difficult, like a long, long sitting period occasionally.